Hey folks, welcome to today's webinar on CMMI for Security. My name is Chris DeMale. We're going to wait a couple minutes before we get started just to give every participant an opportunity to come on in. So again, welcome to the webinar. We look forward to chatting with you. Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming on. We're going to start the webinar in just another minute or two. Waiting for folks to join. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We'll get started in another 30 to 60 seconds. Looks like we still have folks coming in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Probably give it another 30 seconds to a minute before we get started. All right, folks. Well, we're a couple minutes past the allotted start time, so let's get going. Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris DeMale. I'm Vice President of Global Strategy for ISACA and the CMMI Institute. We're really excited to be chatting with you here today about the very pressing issue of CMMI for security. And I'm joined by two of our top partners, which is to say Dr. Sankaran and Mr. Teenu are here with us today in order to elaborate on some of this very, again, pressing issue that is critical to today's security in the marketplace. So with that, if I can open this up, and as far as our presenters go, and for myself, I've been supporting thousands of organizations enhance their performance and achieve their goals through process-driven application of the CMMI model since 2017. But in seniority, I'm far outranked by Dr. Sankaran, a globally recognized expert in business performance and has been a lead appraiser for CMMI since 2006 with a top consulting firm. And he is a member of the CMMI AI working group. And then Mr. Teenu has been a CMMI lead appraiser with over 30 years of experience, having led global CMMI engagements across various industry sectors for driving process excellence and business transformation. So we're very pleased to have these gentlemen with us here tonight. So, and tonight, at least where I'm at. So thanks, guys. If we can flip the page, please. Thank you. So here's the content for our agenda that we'll be going through. I'll be opening things up by talking about what is CMMI and what CMMI can do for you. Once we get through that, I'll be passing it over to Dr. Sankaran to elaborate on the specific areas in which this is applicable and the reasons why thousands of other organizations, like the ones that you represent, have chosen to engage with the CMMI and our partners in the past in order to enhance their performance and achieve fantastic results. So you'll see we'll be talking about both the critical elements of CMMI as well as what does this have to do with security and how to apply CMMI frameworks, globally recognized frameworks, to this security application in order to enhance that capability. If we can flip the page, please. Thank you. For those of you, if you have not heard of CMMI before, the CMMI Institute was originally developed by the US government in order to build out strong capabilities for the types of IT and software manufacturing in which there was a high degree of sensitivity. As a result, CMMI has spread around the world with a wide adoption by governments and other types of organizations specifically in order to see what you see here. CMMI Performance Solutions is a proven outcome-based performance improvement model providing faster, better, and cheaper results that can be proven. And if you're asking yourself, yeah, you can't do fast, good, and cheap, well, we welcome you to test that because CMMI has been able to show that through this model application, you are able to achieve it. The second piece that I want to emphasize is that CMMI is the globally accepted standard that improves and enhances organizational capability and performance, setting the bar for assessing organizational maturity. So your previous investments in your maturity and your capability, whether you're using something like Agile, right, or whether you're using other types of frameworks that are out there, we can show you how to get the most out of those frameworks by utilizing CMMI's capability. And then the third piece is that CMMI provides a prioritized and evolutionary capability with maturity pathways to build and implement new capabilities, delivering measurable results. I can tell you that every word of this was carefully chosen and specifically selected in order to emphasize each one of these components. So that when you're thinking about your projects, your ways to enhance capability for your organization, CMMI model can deliver a roadmap for you to then utilize over the course of months, years, the course of the implementation of your project in order to stay on track and get the funding that you need, the resources you need with communication to your board, your executives, whatever it is that you require within your role. And finally, don't just take our word for it, right? We do over 5,000 appraisals every year. We also have over 13,000 appraised organizations operating in over 50 countries. And so the reason why this model continues to thrive over 3 decades after its initial development is because it is widely used and highly effective. If we can flip the page, please. Thank you. And so what we see here is that CMMI is a globally recognized process improvement framework, right? It is developed and maintained by the CMMI Institute, a wholly owned subsidiary of ISACA, which is what you see the logo of here and also on my shirt. It's designed to be sector agnostic and applicable across industries, and we've seen it be very effective within that role. We see that it incorporates best practices from academia, government, and industry in order to create something that is resilient and market-facing, as well as extremely relevant. This helps organizations improve performance, quality, and efficiency. The current version is CMMI 3.0, featuring 8 domain-specific models, one of which is security, of course, that we'll be focusing on here today. And we will be also talking about assessing and building the security posture as I hand it over to our SMEs and colleagues. Dr. Sankaran will be going first. So I would encourage you over the course of this, please don't be shy about using the Q&A, asking questions. When these gentlemen conclude, we'll be having a Q&A session and we'll do our best to address every question that we get, as well as follow-up conversations for those that are interested. We're happy to be a part of that discussion. With that, Dr. Sankaran, I pass it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks to you and Lindsay as well as ISACA leadership team for giving us this wonderful opportunity once again. Compared to the earlier webinar we did. Thank you. Thank you for that support. And also thanks for that fantastic context setting, which is extremely crucial in the current context. The business scenario that we are in today, friends, I'm sure all of us, all the viewers, everybody listening to this will understand security has become a business imperative, and safeguarding every organization from all types of attacks is something which is extremely crucial and has found a place repeatedly in the top management agenda. And therefore, when security as a domain got introduced in CMI about 6-7 years back itself, it took a very formal shape when multiple domains got released. And there are different types of standards, but we will see the uniqueness what the CMMI framework typically brings in. And when we bring in that entire perspective, what we did from KPMG, we went back and looked at different research work, different thought leadership papers to put things in perspective to understand what seems to be the global understanding and landscape of the security as an overall topic, but not limited to one dimension. When I say one dimension, everybody talks only about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is just one part of it. There are other aspects: process security, product security, and solution security, and then physical security. So there could be then information and data security. Within security itself, there are different flavors, different types, and how nicely CMMI connects all of them to provide that capability to an organization, build that capability to insulate itself from different types of attacks on any of these dimensions. So when we look at different reports of state of security in the current context, just to put numbers in perspectives, look at the kind of commercial impact it seems to be having. Almost $4.88 million in 2024 alone, resulting from a 10% increase in 2023 on what on average global cost of a data breach. A data breach can have such a financial impact. And for a financial firms in particular, which could include banking and other financial institutions, on an average, it was even higher to about $6.08 million. And when we look at different projects, especially from cybersecurity venture projects, that worldwide cyber crime damages is reaching $10.5 trillion annually, and they are expecting it to go to that number by 2025, 2026, friends. So you can understand the dimensions of these numbers from a financial impact perspective. Nowadays, we are all talking about AI, generative AI, then agentic AI, and very soon some of the companies have started talking about quantum plus AI. So imagine the computing power that is increasing day by day. And obviously, AI can be used or misused in both direction. Gen AI and large language models are currently being used by even cyber criminals to launch more sophisticated attacks, including convincing phishing content. In fact, there was one publication, a blog from ISACA, author leadership in the ISACA website. I was going through 2 days back. They use a new term called neurophishing. Biometric data, which is being used in many places in these times, are also being used by the cyber criminals to launch a phishing attack, which will be extremely convincing phishing content from your own company, from our own companies, right? In response to this, of course, security teams are also working on, while blue teams and red teams will work on variety of things, and blue teams are currently working on adopting AI for real-time threat analysis and automated incident response. So AI is another area that security is going to play a vital role. Every other end users are also asking their immediate service provider, hey, you know what, if you're going to use AI, what's the guarantee of security of my own data or the entire process that we are going to be engaging with? So extremely critical to build that confidence to the end user. So security is not about just, a kind of initiative or a program anymore. It is a capability of the organization to build client confidence, friends. From a perspective of workforce or skill gap, what I gathered information is close to about global security, cybersecurity workforce shortage is being estimated at 4 million professionals. Can you imagine how certain shortages can be playing its own impact in the organizational progress? And what is the spend looking like? The dimensions of looking at security spend increases. In 2024, 85% of the organization plan to increase cybersecurity budgets. In fact, Gartner is forecasting that spending on data privacy and cloud security is seeing a huge increase. The growth rates in 2024 is almost touching close to about 24 to 25%. That's a very interesting aspect coming up. And over and above, regulations and compliance, statutory and regulatory requirements cannot be sidelined, cannot be ignored. As government recognize the threat of various cyber attacks, how are these regulatory requirements are constantly intensifying? It is in fact predicted 75% of the population will have its personal data covered by modern privacy regulations. To that extent, federal agencies are working constantly in putting the right set of regulations and statutory requirements so that all stakeholders are protected from any type of breaches that can cause very serious impediments. Now, when we see this from a global security perspective, cyber security perspective, I want to look at from information security angle also. And that's another interesting perspective. When we start thinking about the information security, phishing seems to be remaining a top threat. And we just saw which attack seems to be on the top. And for nearly 30% of all global data breaches are reported to be the starting point, 90% of all cyber incidents, phishing is going to be at the top. And even today, very convincing phishing mails and SMS are all coming up where individuals fall trapped to that. Cloud intrusions. Let's not forget cloud security also. Cloud is also another important enabler, business enablers nowadays. Cloud intrusions increased by 75% in 2023. And in cloud, misconfigurations account for about 23%, leading to cloud security incidents. And almost over half of the organizations are reporting phishing as the most common method used to steal cloud credentials, friends. Can you imagine the landscape of the challenges the leadership team and the organizations are going through? Another interesting aspect is the rising sophistication of malware. Cyber criminals are increasingly leveraging open source malware and in fact, MAS, typically referred to as malware as a service, to lower the barrier to entry. So which means 30% increase in the first half of 2024, and encrypted threats are also increasing by almost 92% in the same period. So quite a scary news in front of us, why an organization need to protect itself from all types of challenges. Supply chain attacks are also having a significant impact. Over 60% of supply chain organizations now consider cybersecurity risk a key evaluation criteria for third-party partners. So service providers will be selected only upon the fact that they demonstrate their ability to handle security breaches, vulnerabilities, threats, prevent them, protect them, so that the confidence can be multiplied. And from a physical security perspective, I'm just going in the different dimensions as I talked about earlier. I said global cyber security, the information security, now physical security. Because CMMI framework is not limiting to any one dimension. That's the differentiation compared to any other security standards. While it is compatible with various other standards, it will complement. At the same time, the coverage is wide. Right? From a physical security perspective, I was curious to know what is the market size of this. And I was told that the growth is almost close to about $196 billion by 2032. And physical security market is projected to grow continuously. And because many large organizations. It's not only one sector that we refer to information technology or technology segment, but there are other segment, infrastructure segment, energy segment, everywhere. The physical security becomes very important. What are the common breaches we have been seeing? Common breaches includes physical security over the past 5 years, coming with about 60% of companies have experienced it. And what is the cost of such incident? Estimated to be $100,000. And usual solutions, video surveillance, CCTV, right, access control systems, and perimeter security has been the usual solutions that which we are all familiar with how we protect. The reasons for these security incidents have also been identified as supply chain issues. At least 26% of the companies are citing supply chain issues as the reason, and 39% cited the state of economy also as a factor contributing to increased security incidents. That's very interesting. Somebody talking about even the state of economy. Now, on the integrated systems, there is certainly a rising demand for integrated security solution because we are now completely getting ready to bring in physical and digital systems together. Whether it is robotic process automation or it is through AI, now human and machines are going to come together, and more through Industry 5.0, we are going to see cobots, collaborative bot technology taking place. And therefore, the trend will continue to focus on concerns over safety, over security, and adoption of cloud-based data storage. All of these is also going to play a vital role. So friends, we saw physical security. Now let's look at the last segment, which is threats and vulnerability management. That's another interesting aspect because there are so many areas, so many organizations continuously working on coming out with specific solutions through tactics and techniques to deal and handle threats and vulnerabilities. There has been exponential growth in this space. Reported CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures, increased by 30% from 2023 to 2024. Then you can imagine how cyber criminals and threats, they are becoming extremely creative in the current context. In 2024 alone, a record of 40,000 plus CVEs were published. This is called common vulnerabilities and exposures. And exposing the organization standpoint, the failure to apply security patches causes approximately 60% of all breaches. In fact, a 2025 recent study found that over a quarter of organizations remained vulnerable to a WannaCry ransomware exploit years after it emerged, after it actually emerged. So that means, are we not learning lessons from the past? And that's the question that keeps coming in. While a small percentage of vulnerabilities are actively weaponized, there is a very high impact. In the first half of 2024, we could see 0.91% of vulnerabilities were actively exploited in the wild. So friends, there is a lot of area to improve. In fact, the CISA-KEV, and that's popularly called the CISA-KEV catalog. And CISA typically stands for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It's a US federal agency that maintains KEV catalog, which is called Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog. And there are several vulnerabilities which are part of this particular catalog. And in terms of numbers, how does this catalog helps? They are available in the public domain to help the organization with about 1,251 vulnerabilities as of 2024 update. And in 2024 itself, they have added 186 new vulnerabilities. And each of these vulnerabilities also provides what techniques we should use, what tactics we should use, how we should handle that vulnerability, how we should manage that vulnerabilities. And it has been shown that companies that prioritizes using this KEV catalog can significantly reduce their risk exposure. So this is something that is going to be very important in that standpoint. And last but not the least, when we look at the product security, That is also very important because every company is building very important solutions, products, which could be for manufacturing, which could be for aviation industry, could be for pharma industry, could be for healthcare. And in 2024, according to Intel Product Security Report, 96% of vulnerabilities mitigated by the company were discovered proactively through its internal security assurance process. All the more need why we would need a framework like CMMI for security domain to benchmark our internal processes constantly, because almost 96% of vulnerabilities were mitigated simply by following internal security assurance processes, which are benchmarked with multiple standards. This reflects a commitment of security first to the organization in terms of product development. In fact, some of the companies have started taking the initiative on product development as security by design. And from a regulatory landscape, we can look at the UK Act, which went into effect by April 2024, mandating minimum security standards for internet connected products. They are trying to be very, very particular about, because internet connected products has got its own vulnerability huge. And from a third party perspective, because today we use third party software, open source libraries, this would typically pose significant product security challenges for the company, and it becomes very important for the organization to address these risks because the code is going to be outside the organization. So friends, look at the dimensions coming up. From the last point of product security, now we are moving on to process security. Now look at how many security dimensions we covered. The reason why I'm covering all these dimensions, this is what a CMMI security covers. Currently, when we look at the process security, the market size is phenomenal. It's pretty huge. And you can actually see growth from $7.47 billion in 2025, expected to grow close to about $12 to $13 billion by 2032. And the market expansion is primarily being driven by the need for various competency development, risk management, and as well as compliance. Of course, safety incidents is another aspect where several studies are also compounding to the view that 83% of incidents attributed to some form of manual error, human error. And in fact, some of the studies also says that due to three aspects, due weak safety culture, low emergency and preparedness for the same. And this is very interesting contributions, right? Primary factors that are coming through includes the lack of hazard awareness itself. In fact, when my colleague Teenu is going to walk you through on the CMMI framework itself, you would see lots of practice areas being called out to spread awareness, to give education, and then identification, and then looking at operating procedures in place and making sure they are imbibed as part of the culture. Security is just not a separate topic, it's an imbibed culture, and how an organization can insulate itself from inadequate emergency preparedness, right? So friends, these are some of the highlights. I'm not going to read each of the box, but want to draw some specific attentions when we look at trying to put things in perspective, especially in this particular slide. This is a very interesting one where, as part of our research, we could see variety of numbers that is telling us what we need to do in terms of aligning to the model expectations. Average time to even detect a data breach is about 118 days. We have also marked where these research are coming from. From an education sector perspective, all right, an average of 2,500 plus cyber attacks per week is experienced. And 17% of malware attacks are targeting individuals. In fact, some of more interesting ones that comes up is the leak of confidential information and disruption of core activity are the top two results of a cyber attack at 64% and 40% respectively. And we keep hearing this multiple times, where are Facebook getting hacked, or Insta getting hacked, or WhatsApp getting hacked, and therefore what typically are the consequences? Very recent articles also say some of the top-notch companies CEOs WhatsApp getting hacked, right? Gift card requests are the most common way to retrieve funds from an attack. That's very interesting. And in fact, that in terms of the overall through gift card request, the attack has happened close to about 68% of such attacks. And according to ISACA State of Cybersecurity report, 35% cybersecurity professionals report increased attacks in 2025, while 43% anticipates attacks next year. And what is a large portion of attack distribution? 44% is on social engineering, 26% on malware, and 37% coming from exploited vulnerabilities. And you can see in the slide some aspects of healthcare breach, some aspects of institutional reporting coverage. All of these are also covered. Interesting piece is also that all of these are happening so rapidly, friends. They are happening so fast that organizations may not even get enough time to respond. This is where some of these frameworks, such as CMI for security or referring back to CISA KEV catalog, often trying to get those resolutions and getting it ready and insulated, is something which is extremely important for the organizations to come through. So while security is just not a department, it is not just a responsibility of, oh, we have got CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, it is his responsibility. Yeah, there can be a security center of excellence in a company which will define processes, conduct research, but security will become everybody's responsibility. So with that note, let's now deep dive into CMMI, because this actually permeates every aspect that we just now saw, from physical security to digital assets to process to products and to building the entire capability for organization to be trustworthy, resilient, and protect their integrity as an enterprise. So with that note, I will now hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Teenu Puri, who will walk us through into the CMMI model with a lot more insights. Over to you, Teenu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sankaran and Chris, for setting the context and setting the stage. Greetings to all the viewers and listeners. A great pleasure to share a detailed perspective on this critical subject, which is sector agnostic, as Chris rightly said. Thanks to ISACA and CMMI Institute for this wonderful opportunity. So, friends, we take this discussion forward and deep dive into further details on this contemporary subject on information and cybersecurity, and how CMMI security model adoption can significantly benefit and enable the business needs of any organization. So, friends, now we start with the hyper-connected business landscape and security as a factor which is amidst them. So, friends, security is indeed one of the highest common factors, so to say, in this global business landscape today. The current times are indeed an era of digital economy driven by digital technologies via digital infrastructure, digital services, and digitally enabled business models. So, if we quickly look at the evolution of the digital economy, friends, typically in the 1990s, there was the advent of internet. In 2000s, we saw e-commerce coming up. In 2010s, there were mobile phones, social media, cloud revolution, etc. And nowadays in 2020s, we have artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, metaverse, etc. So if you look at the components of the contemporary digital economy, we have the core digital economy, which is the digital infrastructure itself, the hardware, software, telecom, cloud services, etc. Then we have a digitalized economy, the traditional sectors transformed by the digital tools, e-commerce, fintech, telemedicine, e-learning, etc. Then we have platform economy, which is basically the ecosystems built around the data and the online user interaction, typically the social media platforms, cloud service platforms, and the online applications. And then we speak about the AI economy, as Dr. Shankaran mentioned about the artificial intelligence. Now, one of the important elements of the economy is the AI economy, economic transformation driven by AI worldwide. And nowadays, we also speak about the green digital economy. What is green digital economy? It's basically environmental or climate sustainability enabled by digital innovation. And lastly, we have also very contemporary Web3 or decentralized economy, which is all about the blockchain enabled ownership and the transactions. Why I mention all this, friends, is that at the core of the digital economy is the data, which is the key asset of any organization. In other words, what we call as the information assets in the context of virtually any organization as a part of the digital ecosystem. Now, information assets could be digital assets. Any organization would have databases. They would have files and documents, source code, cloud storage, emails, etc. There would be physical assets like printed documents, laptops, servers, USB drives. They're human assets. Employees with access to sensitive information, or the vendors or the contractors or third party providers, they all entail human assets. There are software and applications, be it ERP applications, CRM applications, and any custom built applications. There is intellectual property, trade secrets, patents, proprietary algorithms, and also there are service related assets. There could be configuration data. I know it could be, say, CMDB, configuration management database, in the context of ITSM organizations. There could be a network configuration, for example, IP and DNS settings, firewall settings, API keys, etc. So essentially, the whole phenomena called digital transformation, which is nothing but the process of integrating the digital technologies into various business sectors, that's transforming an organization's operations and the customer value proposition in the services and products of any organization. So this is indeed a hyper-connected digital landscape on a global scale, as you can see on the slide. There are various interconnected and interdependent cloud services. Cloud services could be something like, it could be infrastructure as a service, it could be platform as a service, it could be software as a service. Then there are digital platforms, there are data centers, there are mobile devices, there are IoT network and devices. So as a part of the digital landscape, friends, we also would have innovation platforms, social media platforms, content platforms. Like, when I say content platforms nowadays, they're OTT platforms. And also the
Hey, Teenu, your voice is cracking.
essence of, okay, is it better now? Apologies for that.
Sure, you can try.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, now it is continuous. You can go ahead. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so I mentioned about the digital trust, and I also mentioned that security is one of the integral elements of the digital trust. What is security? Security is primarily protecting systems and data via various technical defenses and several proactive measures. And of course, the best bet we have is ISACA's CMMI security model that addresses the entire gamut of security across the industry sectors. The rampant challenge on information and cybersecurity that Dr. Sankaran mentioned, it cuts across, if we call it digital quagmire, so to say, amidst the various challenges that we see today in the digital landscape. So the business impact, as we mentioned earlier, in terms of the data leakage and the business disruption, it critically requires security as an imperative function in any organization. So going forward, we will look at the finer aspects of the adoption of a model like CMMI security would help an organization. Next slide, please. So friends, now question is security a differentiator or a hygiene? I would quote a few very famous adages from the industry, which I think would answer this question. There's a very famous adage you might have heard, is that cybersecurity is the conscience of the digital mind. And we also say cybersecurity is no longer a lock on the door; it is the rhythm of the whole house. And we also say cybersecurity is the invisible architect of trust. So eventually, what it means is security is both a differentiator and a hygiene. And when we say security is a differentiator, a strategic differentiator, it basically means the essence of integrating security into the core operations of any organization. So, what would we mean by integrating the security into the core operations? Typically, the practices of identity and access management, secure financial transactions, secure email and communications, endpoint controls. Nowadays, the software industry talks about DevSecOps, DevSecOps, basically, it would mean integrating into the CI/CD pipelines. Practices like security code review, secret scanning during the code commit, vulnerability assessment, etc. Also, practices like data storage, network security, like firewalls, VPN, intrusion detection systems, and of course the awareness among the stakeholders. So all these practices, they typically go into the core operations from security perspective. When we talk about appealing to security conscious clients, it's all about integrating security into services and products. This is something important to understand. How can security be integrated into services and products? Say typically the software development lifecycle from the software industry perspective, security needs to be embedded into the entire lifecycle, starting with the requirements, which would involve the threat modeling. Design would require secure architecture, security APIs, integrating functionalities like multi-factor authentication. Development would entail secure coding and static and dynamic code analysis. Testing would entail penetration testing and so on. So on. How can security be integrated into the services? Now, for example, an organization which is into delivering IT support, cloud hosting, financial services, or healthcare. So the entire service development and delivery lifecycle also needs to integrate the security throughout, starting with service design and planning, which was basically would require again threat modeling, resilience testing. Dr. Shankaran spoke about practices like the red teaming, the blue teaming, and the purple teaming for the purpose of simulating the attacks. Then service provisioning and operations in terms of the secure configuration and hardening of the operating systems, etc. And of course, the customer interfaces, secure channels like HTTPs, VPN, the privacy controls, etc. When we speak about enhancing the brand reputation, it's all about the customer loyalty, and of course, it's imperative. Securing, or rather leveraging security for market expansion, this is for the business sustenance and growth. Security as a hygiene factor, which would be managing the disruptions from the internal and external threats. Regulatory compliance importance, this is for avoiding the legal penalties and the reputational damage. Securing the hygiene practices from security perspective, it would basically mean practices like identity and access management, incident management, etc. And then lastly, the maintaining the business continuity. What is continuity? Continuity is basically organization's ability to continue critical operations and maintain the functions during and after a disaster. Next slide, please. Significance of security in a digitally driven world. Friends, now as a digital reality, as I mentioned earlier, almost all organizations are a part of the hyper-connected digital landscape. The emerging challenge is that as the digital landscape grows, the attack surface for security threats also becomes broader. So what is the solution? Solution is the operational resilience. Operational resilience is basically an organization's ability to anticipate, withstand, recover from, and adapt to security threats and disruptions. And the various elements of operational resilience are risk identification and management, robust security controls like, as I mentioned, firewalls and endpoint controls, etc. The entire incident management lifecycle in terms of taking care of the ransomware, the data breaches, and DDoS kind of attacks. That business continuity, as I mentioned. Supply chain management, there could be a lot of security threats in the entire supply chain. Then monitoring and detection in terms of using tools like CM, endpoint controls, and the monitoring and event management systems. The overall security governance in terms of the leadership and accountability. Regulatory compliance is something important across the geographies, and also the training and awareness. All in all, therefore, in a digitally driven world, cybersecurity is indeed not optional. It is the very foundation for sustainable innovation, trust, and competitive strength. Next slide, please. So, friends, now this is the CMMI framework, capability maturity model integration. and let's talk about the maturity evolution in the security context. Friends, the CMMI model has 8 domains: development, services, security, people, data, safety, supplier, and virtual. And of course, security is one of the distinct and a very popular domain. This is applicable for any industry, sector, regardless of the business it carries out. CMI security helps assess, improve, and evolve an organization's security posture. And the CMMI framework basically enables a process maturity evolution from maturity level 1 to maturity level 5. Now, if you look on the screen, friends, there are 17 core practice areas which are applicable for all the 8 domains. For example, if we pick up 2 practice areas in the context of security, say for example governance. Governance, even though it is one of the core 17 practice areas, but in the context of security, it would primarily cover the business alignment and the management intervention. And similarly, implementation infrastructure, again one of the core practice areas in the context of security, would cover the security process infrastructure. And also, if you can see, there are 2 security specific practice areas from the CMI model. One is enabling security, other is managing security threats and vulnerabilities. Enabling security practice area is all about basically helping establish an organization, the basic security, governance, the infrastructure and systems from the security perspective. And managing security threats and vulnerabilities would help organizations operationalize the various security activities by managing the threats, vulnerabilities, and breaches. In the further slides, we will be getting into the details on how CMMI basically gets into operationalizing the security management. Next slide, please. So, in terms of cybersecurity as a strategic imperative, this is just in continuation to what we discussed earlier, vis-a-vis security being a strategy as much as a hygiene. So, cybersecurity as business strategy. Now, security imperatively needs to be linked to the business strategy, and it is a strategy in itself. And managing cyber risks would basically entail identifying the security threats and vulnerabilities, as we mentioned earlier. And the entire risk management ideally needs to be integrated with the enterprise risk management. What is a vulnerability? Vulnerability is basically a weakness or a flaw in a system, or a software or a process. It's like an unpatched software or a weak password or a misconfigured firewall, etc. And a threat can be either a malicious threat, an accidental threat, or a failure. And basically, identification of threat is typically done by threat modeling. And threat is typically a potential danger that could exploit a vulnerability, like a malware, phishing attack, insider threats, and natural disasters. So, how would we support digital transformation? It is through the operational integrity. And how do we ensure operational integrity? This is by ensuring a secure operations, reliable operations, and trustworthy operations. That is managing the security posture, vulnerabilities, cyber attacks, incident management, and the regulatory compliance. And lastly, on this slide, building customer trust, all the measures that I mentioned earlier, they eventually culminate in building customer trust, because even a single security incident may collapse an entire business overnight. Next slide, please. Friends, now there is something like risk appetite, and let's link it to the security posture. There are 3 important phenomena that we need to understand. There's a risk appetite, there is a risk tolerance, and risk posture. What is a risk appetite? It is basically a phenomena from the strategic intent perspective. A risk appetite is primarily an organization's willingness to take a risk. For example, an organization might believe that they say we have a low appetite for security incidents that affect customer trust, but we have a moderate appetite for adopting new technologies that introduce manageable operational risks. On the contrary, risk tolerance is something very similar to the operational limits. It is a leeway that an organization would have to operate within, something similar to acceptable range of deviation. And risk capability would be an organization's intrinsic capability, but that is the maximum degree or ability to manage and absorb the risks. And eventually, risk posture is the overall maturity vis-a-vis the operational security, solution security, and the supply chain security of an organization. Therefore, aligning risk appetite, agility, and resilience, they typically culminate in promising an organization's security posture. Next slide, please. So we talk about the business strategy, which in turn drives the security of an organization. Now, business objectives would typically mean like an organization introspecting that why we need to secure. It is a why part of the security. On the contrary, the security strategy and objectives would be what and how we secure. Like it's typically around the CIA triad. CIA would mean confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So these are the three pillars of the entire security program in an organization. And eventually, a model like CMMI, so security, it requires and mandates and promotes measuring the whole program through security KPIs well integrated with the security strategy of an organization. So on this slide, if you can see the various examples, there are business objectives at the top. On the right side, if you see like increasing customer trust, improve operational efficiency, ensure uptime and reliability. Then these business objectives are linked to the respective security objectives like data protection, access control, disaster recovery, and eventually the security objectives have the respective KPIs identified. Typically the compliance rate, the number of unauthorized access attempts, and the recovery time objective. So this is basically to mention that an organization typically would be expected to have a comprehensive measurement program for the security management. These are just three indicative KPIs. However, the measurement program would entail a comprehensive set of KPIs across the various elements. For example, for the vulnerability assessment, organization would need to have measurements like MTTR, mean time to remediate. Likewise, from the security operations perspective, KPIs like MTD, the mean time to detect incidents, or MTTR again in terms of mean time to respond to an incident. Likewise, from the network perspective, the network segment compliance percentage, and so on, there could be so many other measurements. This is just to give an idea that the adoption of CMI security would basically be quantitative, even if an organization opts to stay at level 2, 3, and then, of course, eventually the high maturity level 4 and level 5. Next slide, please. So in terms of the security strategy, friends, as I mentioned, these are the three pillars, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality is basically all about controlling the unauthorized access. Integrity is about controlling unauthorized modifications. And availability is about controlling the disruptions in the access. And the three elements of, rather the four elements of security strategy are the governance. Governance is typically the organizational context and the business. The people factor, in terms of the people integrity, the awareness, and the people commitment. The process factor, the various security processes and the workflows, and the technologies, which is basically the backbone of security deployment in any organization. We have advanced persistent threats, APTs. Now, what is an APT? It's typically a highly coordinated long-term cyber attack carried out by skilled adversaries who typically infiltrate a target's network. They stay hidden and they continuously harvest information or cause disruption, often for strategic or the economic gain. So APTs is something which an organization has to watch for because typically they are, various infiltrated elements which may stay hidden in the organization for a long time. Next slide, please. Security posture, even though we mentioned this term very briefly earlier, what is security posture? Security posture is the overall strength and readiness of an organization's cybersecurity defenses. Basically, how well prepared it is to prevent, detect, and respond to the cyber threats. And rather the security posture, it entails operational security, solution security, and supply chain security. And operationally, security posture is enabled by a couple of practices. One is, of course, the risk management, the whole sequence of risk identification, risk assessment, risk mitigation, etc. Then security controls, the complete suite of process and technical controls are required. Regulatory compliances, security awareness, because security is eventually a 365-day year-round activity involving an entire organization. And of course, the incident or the security breach management and the monitoring these are the imperative practices from the operationalizing security management perspective. Next slide, please. Friend, now any organization needs to identify the sources of security needs. Typically, the cycle starts with identifying the sources and then eventually attacking or rather addressing the ways to mitigate the risks. So, typically, the key themes around risk or security source identification on hardware, the various hardware elements of an organization, the softwares, the firmware, the physical security, like the video surveillance, the perimeter security, etc., the hard copies, the electronic data, access criteria, and the password protection. Next slide, please. Now, empowering the security in terms of the culture, infrastructure, and risk governance. Security should be enabled by culture. This is a cultural institutionalization, which is something eventually that would save an organization. So this culture should percolate from the top to bottom and across an organization. Infrastructure is imperative. The technical enablement, the technical infrastructure, there would be costs, there would be investments. Eventually, the return on investment comes through, by minimizing the cost of failure or the business loss or the reputation. And from the risk governance perspective, as I mentioned, this entails the entire risk management process. But just to reiterate, ideally, the security risk management should be integrated with the enterprise risk management in an organization. Next slide, please. As a security operations center, which CMMI calls as SOC, some organizations also call it as a response center. This is a very critical function, and they often say SOC is basically the eyes, the ears, and the hands of an organization's cyber defense, and it is also called typically the nerve center of an organization's cyber defense. So it is a place where people, processes, technologies, they converge to detect cyber threats, to investigate the cyber threats, respond to the threats, and prevent the threats. And the various layers of SOC are the governance, the prevention, detection, and the recovery. And the top critical business aspects of this particular function are strategic alignment, operational resilience, as I mentioned earlier, early threat detection, rapid response, regulatory compliance, and the brand and the customer trust. Next slide, please. Friends, briefly talking about the security architecture, this is the hardcore enablement of security in any organization, and CMMI Security covers this very well. There are different layers of architecture which drive the respective security controls. Briefly talking about them, there is a conceptual architecture, which is basically the vision and the direction. Talked about the various strategic intent and principles. And this in turn drives the various procedural controls like the policies, the frameworks, and the governance. Then there's a component architecture, which is the strategic and the design part, which drives the logical systems and relationships, and eventually the application controls and infrastructure controls. There's a physical architecture layer, which talks about the implementation and deployment. The endpoint controls, they typically map to these kinds of architecture elements. And then we have operational architecture, which is basically about a sustenance. This is the day-to-day security related processes and workflows, like with the incident management, the patch management, vulnerability management. They all are a part of the sustenance element of the operational architecture. Next slide, please. Now, security threats and vulnerabilities. This is about identifying the security threats and vulnerabilities, which is the starting point in the security management lifecycle of any organization. And the various examples of vulnerability identification are practices like secure code analysis, penetration testing, vulnerability monitoring, black box scanners, which means testing a system without the internal knowledge of the system, though. Vulnerability scanners, network scanners, protocol analyzers, and some of the typical examples of threat identification are threat modeling, simulation and modeling, APTs, phishing, social engineering, spoofing tools. And security breaches would nothing but the incidents. Some examples like, as Dr. Shankaran mentioned, the malware attacks, the phishing, insider threats, APTs. There is also a new phenomena called MITM, man in the middle attacks, which means, there could be somebody who's intercepting the communication between two parties. When sometimes, an attacker may intercept the login credentials over an insecure Wi-Fi. Right, please. So yeah, I guess we have spoken about the incident management, patch management, etc. But this slide typically mentions about it's like an icing on the cake. A model like CMMI talks about ongoing assessments, how effective the security processes are. Now, this is the key value proposition of CMMI security, which typically indicates that even if there could be intricate investments in the processes, there should be ongoing assessments carrying out how effective they are, and eventually, triggering the whole PDCA cycle, plan to check and act. Next slide, please. So I guess, yeah, this was a very short time, and then eventually these are topics that we covered. So tying it all together, we spoke about how digital economy leads to the whole essence of digital transformation, hyper-connected business landscape, and eventually requiring an organization to maintain the digital trust. And how we also spoke about how the business objectives that drive the security strategy, how security strategy eventually drives the security objectives. What are the various information assets in the context of any business, and what are the various operational aspects of security management in terms of SOC, security need identification, security architecture and controls, vulnerability and threat management, risk management, incident management, and the ongoing effectiveness as well. So I guess these are a couple of thoughts that I had from my side in this limited time. So back to Chris and Dr. Shankar.
Great. Mr. Teenu, Dr. Sankaran, this was an amazing webinar. You guys were fantastic. So thank you for so much great information. We do have a couple questions coming in from the Q&A. Because we are already over time, what I would request is we will be sending out emails as a follow-up to the participants here. So please, we encourage you to bring your questions to us. We'd really like to engage with you and show you how CMMI can work great for you. If we can please advance the slide one, and the Q&A question is how best to check maturity on DevSecOps, A, to get a sharp quantitative and qualitative results, and B, if it's underutilized as an opportunity to gauge ROI. So, Dr. Sankaran and Mr. Teenu, I would put that question to you if we can give them a brief answer, and I assure you every question that we're getting here in the Q&A, we are going to be reaching out to you for answers. So over to you, Dr. Sankaran.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. In fact, a good question, especially in the space of DevSecOps. There are many frameworks, especially coming from DORA, for example, DevOps Research Association, where they publish a framework as well as the metrics. What is the acceptable metrics related to DORA, 5 metrics, including reliability and stuff like that. But what we are seeing increasingly in the industry is companies trying to benchmark their own internal processes they have put in place for DevSecOps and benchmark those processes with CMMI. I'll tell you why I'm calling out CMMI explicitly, because in CMMI model, we have got context specific to DevSecOps. And if we just filter on that context specific to DevSecOps, sometime back we saw a list of practice areas. There are close to 17 common practice areas, and another 14 domain-specific practice areas. Relevant practice areas has got DevSecOps context-specific information. If we can map that to an organization and then start looking at, okay, because of following certain principles of development, security, and operations together, what are the outcomes we are seeing? In fact, there is a practice area in CMMI called Managing Performance and Measurement, which primarily talks about outcome measures, lead indicators with lagging outcomes. That lagging outcome will be actually return on investment. What is the cost benefit analysis? So if you actually start looking at DevSecOps and within the organization, look at the DevSecOps operation, start benchmarking with CMMI primarily with that context specific, and then the outcomes can be measured, is a great way. Some of the frameworks can be used, leveraged by the company, and see the complete benefits for following through of this. Teenu, you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Shankaran. Two additional inputs from the DevSecOps perspective. Of course, the industry has a lot of interesting KPIs or the measurements. For example, a secure code review percentage and percentage of CI/CD pipelines with integrated security. There are some example KPIs. More interestingly, yes, these KPIs can be very well linked to the ROI. At the end of the day, the best practice is that organizations often have a measurement called SPI, which is basically the Security Posture Index. So, one of the best practices is to attach a weightage to these DevSecOps KPIs, and eventually they all roll up to how effective or how promising the security posture is in an organization. This is all from my side. Thank you.
Great insights, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And so we are over time. So it is time to conclude, my friends. But please look out for an email from members of the ISACA team, including myself and Lindsay Marshall, who has made a lot of arrangements for today and is an essential part of our success. And we also encourage you, join us for the next webinar in the series. So it is titled Data-Driven Confidence, Elevating Enterprise Value with CMMI Data. So that's going to be happening on December 4th. You see the information here, depending on where you are in the world. And with that, it's time for us to conclude here today. So thank you, everyone, for being a part of what we do here at the CMMI Institute. And we look forward to additional conversations with you to use security and CMMI to elevate your performance. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.